Hi, I'm Mr. Mullaney coming to you from my kitchen as this is the delayed opening morning. So I'm using it to film our lesson recap about the Age of Napoleon Beginning. The big idea is that Napoleon rose to power in France and built a vast empire that included much of Europe. Today's lesson, talk about how Napoleon rose to power, how revolutionary reforms changed under Napoleon. And when you look at those reforms, you want to think about where they fit under the political spectrum and how that applies to France during the French Revolution. You also want to talk about how we're going to talk about how Napoleon built an empire in Europe. So I asked the class to consider, what do you think is meant by this statement? It's better to eat than be eaten. That's by Napoleon, and it's very emblematic of what he believed and how he acted. So talk about the rise to power. So he was a military guy. He favored the Jacobins. He also favored Republican rule, meaning that France would be governed by elected leaders. He rises quickly during the revolution. He has these military successes. People turn to him. And in 1799, he becomes a political leader. He becomes first consul. And in 1802, he's named consul for life. He is a self-made emperor in that he declares himself emperor. He invites the Pope to crown him emperor. Pretty ambitious guy as he does that. All right, the reforms. So he keeps prices under control. He encourages industry and he builds up France. He builds up roads and canals. And then you get something that might be a little bit more liberal on the political spectrum for France at this time, public schooling. Then something a little bit more conservative, peace with the Catholic Church. And he encourages emigres who were aligned with the nobility, they were nobility, but they're aligned with maybe more conservative factions. He encourages them to return, but at the same time, something a little bit more liberal and opening jobs to talent. Remember, if you're a conservative at this time, the nobility should get the jobs. It's not about talent. If you're a liberal, you want to change that. It embodies the ideals of the Enlightenment. So that's why we have Napoleon's actions are a little bit all over the political spectrum. He's with the Enlightenment. He's for equality and religious toleration and advancement based on merit, but those rights that women achieved during the French Revolution, they go away. And he really did value order and authority over individual rights. So you want to think about, how did revolutionary reforms change under Napoleon? The reforms that took place with your National Assembly, Legislative Assembly, Convention, Directory, how do they change with Napoleon? So he builds an empire. He redraws Europe, taking over all these countries. He abolishes the Holy Roman Empire. He forces alliances with France, or he invades countries. He is finally stopped at the Battle of Trafalgar off Spain by Horatio Nelson, a British naval officer. So that prevents him from taking over England and whatnot, but he was very, very successful. He blockades European ports to basically wage war against his enemies, especially England, and that creates a scarcity of goods, which is not good for the economy. And when you think about Napoleon, how does Napoleon change Europe when he's in charge of most of it? And was it for good or bad? That is something you'll definitely want to be prepared to discuss. And that is our lesson recap for the Age of Napoleon Begins.